All right, we're live. So give me a yell in the chat if either the audio or video is a little odd. And here it is. So this is the long-awaited kind of flip through and kind of rules overview of Frostgrave. So we started the campaign, the Thaw of the Lich Lord campaign, and there were some viewers that said, "Oh yeah, I don't know the game very well, so it would be great to go over the rules." And I always wanted to kind of take a look at first edition compared to second edition. There weren't major changes, and it's very backwards compatible, which is very commendable for doing a new edition. But we can just take a look basically at the types of things that changed. But yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to, just for the sake of trimming, I'll put up a graphic for Frostgrave so I can cut on that, and I'll kind of reintroduce what we're doing. But I just wanted to take a moment to introduce this, and hope you're having a good Black Friday. I think it's very early in North America right now, so you may be sitting in a parking lot stalking a incredible deal on a flat screen television, but hopefully you got the notification. And so this will go into the archive, and and also show off the Lego minifigs that we used for the first edition campaign that we did. So we built a lot of terrain for those, and so obviously that's not a great scale for 28 mil. And especially metal miniatures are a lot heavier than Lego. So we'll take a look at those later. So yeah, let's get this started. So I'll just have a few seconds of a Frostgrave graphic, and I'll use that to cut. So I'll be right back. Hello and welcome. So this is going to be our second edition flip through of the rulebook, and a little bit of comparison between first and second edition Frostgrave. So Frostgrave was designed by Joseph A. McCullough and published by, you can't see it on there, Osprey Games. So this was a real surprise. Actually, I'm kind of forgetting. We're starting this as casual as possible. I'm forgetting what year Frostgrave first came out. So 2015, wow, it's been that long. Yeah, so first edition was 2015. So yeah, it does make sense that there's already a second edition, and with some refinements. And I think the community has supported, the community behind this game has supported it so well that I think a lot of the adjustments are probably just recommendations from a lot of playing. So this game originally was very attractive because I was coming from Mordheim. So Mordheim was the Games Workshop Warhammer Fantasy kind of ruined city, fighting for Weirdstone skirmish game. And I liked the fantasy setting a lot, and there really wasn't anything that scratched that same itch until Frostgrave came along. And Frostgrave, the things that were different about it is D20 instead of D6s, and it's caster focused, it's magic user focused. So the leader of your warband is always going to be a magic user, and you have actually two magic users in your warband because there's a wizard and an apprentice. So both of them are capable of using spells, just at different levels. So wow, 2015. And so second edition, I think, just came out last year. Just casually flipping through. Yeah, 2020. So just casually flipping through. As you can see right away, the second edition is a bit thicker, and I think that's because it contains not only the scenarios from the first edition, but an additional, I think they doubled. There were 10 in the original first edition, and I think they doubled the amount. So you get a lot more in the book. The major refinements between the two, I think, are mostly in the spell description. McCullough said that you noticed that in the spell list, there were spells that were never chosen, kind of not very useful. And then there were also spells that were overpowered or a little bit, tipped the game a little bit. I think there is a note in the beginning, or is it at the end? That just talks about the changes. Oh yeah, so the Y Second Edition. So I think we'll eventually get to this, but yeah. So the basic reasons that were stated for making the second edition is make the game more fun, and make the rules clearer and more balanced, and also keep all of the supplements, like Thaw of the Lich Lord, relevant without many changes. So I think that's a great ambition to have when you're updating a game. So I guess we should start with, let's start with the I guess a little bit of talk about the setting. So from the back of the second edition book: from far and wide, wizards flock to the frozen ruins of Frostgrave, hoping to uncover ancient treasures and the secrets of lost magic. For many, all they find is an icy tomb, but perhaps a different fate awaits you. In this new edition of the award-winning fantasy skirmish wargame, each player takes on the role of a wizard from one of the 10 schools of magic, drawing from their magic knowledge from a list of 80 spells, accompanied by their apprentice and a warband drawn from more than a dozen henchman types. From lowly thugs to savage barbarians, they venture into the frozen ruins and a deadly place, filled with rival wizards, wandering monsters, animated constructs, demonic entities. With a great deal of skill and a little luck, they will survive and emerge more powerful than ever. So Frostgrave Second Edition offers refined rules based on years of player feedback, a revised spell list, a host of brand new scenarios. It remains fully compatible with all previously published Frostgrave supplements, allowing you to players to revisit past adventures as well as face new challenges. Do you dare enter the city, the frozen city, one more time? So that's kind of a nice introduction to what they have done. So like I was saying, this is a miniature skirmish game. So you're on a 4x4, I think we're playing 3x3 with 2 players. And the nice thing about it is it scales really well. You can, because basically what you're doing is going after treasure counters. And, there's depending on the scenario, there's certain objectives, but there's also treasure counters. And so you're trying to, between sessions, between the different scenarios, is upgrade your warband, find new spells, and get gold so that you can either hire stronger members of your warband, or upgrade weapons and things like that. And there's also I forget what they call it, a stronghold, I believe. So you have a place where between sessions will give you some bonuses and allow you to do things at a little bit better. Oh, so for, I think, that just the quick sake, before we go too much into the rules and everything, let's just take a quick comparison of the two. Oh, and also, just as a quick detail, North Star Miniatures is the company that produces the official Frostgrave miniatures, and a lot of them are photographed within the books. But Frostgrave itself is miniatures agnostic. So you may have been wondering why I said we were using Lego minifigures for the first edition campaign. That's because you can use any miniatures you want. The Lego scale is a little bit big, so we made sure we were playing on a pretty big table, because you are a little bit larger. So line of sight's a little bit easier with your bigger figures, and but we didn't really run into any trouble, anything that broke the game as far as using larger figures. So just a quick look, not too much glare here, at the comparison between the two. So the forward and introduction look the same, and there weren't any wizard types added. So it's keeping the same schools of magic, which is good, because I think they were very well balanced. And then the schools of magic, choosing spells, the stat lines of your characters, and then assembling the warband. So you have a wizard, and then you may purchase an apprentice. If you don't purchase an apprentice, not having a second magic user is a huge penalty. So you can. There are different playstyles that I think can work without apprentices, but to have the ability to, every turn cast twice is a big difference. And so the apprentice has different stats than than your wizard, and so everything is just a little bit harder for them to do. They're a little bit weaker, but they do advance along with your wizard. And then the soldiers and and creatures in Warband. So in the second edition, they make a bigger emphasis on creatures. So things that you can take, like I think the Warhound is kind of the default in the from the first edition. So then playing the game, they do setting up the table, initiative, the phases. So basically, they break the actions down between so kind of alternating. It's alternating activation, but the phases go wizard phase, apprentice phase, soldiers, and creatures. And yeah, there was no change from that. But you can group activate. So in your wizard phase, you may be able to activate soldiers depending on the situation. And and that's the next thing they address is group activation. And then stat rolls it's an added section here. And then movement. And movement into combat, movement by spells, jumping, falling, swimming, they added in second edition. And yeah, otherwise similar. And then in combat, so multiple combats, optional combat rules, and a combat summary. Well, that's nice. So kind of helping with the timing and how things work. Shooting. So modifiers in shooting. So here, yeah, so they break it up into so shooting defense modifiers, shooting into combat, and shooting summary. So a little bit additional for ranged, which I think is, people, I remember complaining in first edition that they thought ranged attacks were too weak, but when they hit pretty hard, especially with a crossbow. So I don't, I didn't really have any problem with it. So damage, they added poison. A section on how poison works, and because I think some of the spells actually did get a poison tag on them, so they may work a little differently, or maybe it wasn't addressed. It was addressed in a just on the card or in the spell description. So spellcasting, success and failure, empowering spells, and resisting spells. And then there's also in second edition canceling spells, targeting figures in combat, and casting spells from scrolls. So that the use of scrolls is much more fleshed out here. And so it's another kind of wizard economy, like crafting potions. So both potions and spells, you have the ability to make those out of game, so between sessions or before a session. And that can become kind of an economy where you can sell those to generate gold for your group. All right. And empowering spells is a really interesting mechanic. So if you fail casting a spell, you do take damage. We'll look at that more specifically later. But you can pay life. You can pay HP to empower a spell. If you just missed the cast, you can give up some life to make the spell successful. And so there's a really nice balance in that. So basically all magic is blood magic in a sense in Frostgrave. All right, yeah, so here's using potions as an added. So I think potions is a new kind of economy and mechanic that was more minor. I think they existed, but they were more of a minor item. Collecting treasure, creature actions, and ending the game. All right, and there you can see some of the North Star minis photographed, painted well, and photographed on some great terrain. So here we go. So the campaign. So talking about injury and death, soldiers, wizards, and apprentices, and then permanent injuries. So similar to Mordheim, it can be pretty deadly. So if characters are taken out of the game, they roll death saves, and I'm not sure if that's what they're called, but yeah, they can take permanent injuries or be completely taken out of the game. And the nice thing is there are thugs and cheap kind of fodder that cost no money to hire, so you can always fill your ranks. You don't have to ever play at such a disadvantage that someone is tabling, 10 figures and you have 5 because they died between sessions. And then out of game spells, so a little bit more explanation of how things work out of game. And I think that's an economy that was kind of added. I don't remember thinking about that so much previously, but in the second edition, I was seeing how both potions and scrolls were very useful for kind of powering a warband's fundraising if they kind of fail to get enough treasure. And then experience levels, so how you improve stats and learning new spells. Counting treasure, so gold crowns is the currency. And potions, yeah, potions exist in both editions, but there's a little more elaboration in them here. So scrolls and grimoires. Grimoires are the way to learn spells. It's kind of spell books that you can learn a spell from, and scrolls are single use, but guaranteed. You don't have to roll for success if you're reading from a scroll. It does go off. And then magic weapons and armor, magic items. So spending treasure. So recruitment, so new soldiers, new apprentice, new wizards, because everybody can die. So buying, oh, here we go. So yeah, buying grimoires and magic items. And so optional rules. Oh, so a black market contacts. Oh, I don't think I've seen that yet. So there are new ways to purchase things and maybe more powerful things. Base is what they're calling. Yeah, so establishing a base. So between sessions, I think after your first session, you've got enough money and you're able to establish a base, and you can build different functional areas like a stable or a laboratory for alchemy, or a forge for weapons and things, and it allows you to have a bigger advantage at between sessions attempting to do certain things depending on what members of your warband you have and the sort of wizard you are, so what you would want to be doing between sessions. So chapter 4 is the spells. So spell descriptions, name, school, base casting, and category. Yeah, all the spell situations the same. And transcendence. Oh, that's a fun role. Yeah, we'll get to that later. Yeah, that's still around. And so then the scenarios. So let's just take a quick look. Yeah, so initially 10. Yeah, so it looks like they have easily doubled. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit off here. So yeah, we've gone from this many scenarios included in the base book to this many. So I think they've doubled. And and there's also an optional rule about balancing. And this was something that came up a bit for us in first edition, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Maybe when I show off the Lego minis, I'll talk about how it got unbalanced. We're playing with three members, and it tended, like when things started to get unbalanced, it started to become like a 2-on-1, and the dynamics, I think, of even numbers would have gone a little bit better as far as kind of distributing the hate and distributing the success at the getting treasure off the table. So yeah, so the original 10 down to the complex temple, and then another 10. So there's quite a bit to play. So even if you don't have any of the previous first edition supplements, you've got a lot to play through in second edition, just in the core book. And then the bestiary, let's see, so undead, animals, construct, demons, miscellaneous creatures, undead, and creature traits. Yeah, so creature traits were added. And then at the end, there's spell cards in the sheet. And then, a discussion in the appendix of these supplements. So this, I think, just tells you what you'll need to do if any tweaks or any changes need to be made in the previous first edition supplements to use them for second. So that is the main differences. A little bit of an overview. And so let's take a look through second edition. All right, so this came out in 2020, and I think was handled really well. I think it was kind of a little bit of a surprise. I don't think there was a lot of warning in advance, and then pretty quickly, I'm trying to think of before or after Frostgrave came out. So there's also a sci-fi version of this miniatures agnostic. I think that actually came out this year, beginning of this year. But it's a similar system, but also kind of incorporating some newer mechanics from games that McCullough has worked on since. So yeah, really fun. So let's give you a little bit of a sense of the setting. So there's a little thematic note here, a little piece of parchment. So long ago, the great city of Felstad sat at the center of a magic empire. Its towering spires, labyrinthine catacombs and immense libraries were the wonder of the age. Potions, scrolls, and mystical items of all description poured forth from its workshops. Then, one cataclysmic night, a mistake was made. In some lofty tower or deep dungeon, a foolish wizard unleashed a magic too powerful to control. A storm rose up, an epic blizzard that swallowed the city whole, burying it deep and leaving the area a vast frozen wasteland. The empire was shattered, and its magic faded. As the centuries came and went, Felstad passed from history to legend and on into myth. Only a few wizards, clinging to the last remnants of mystical knowledge, still believed that the lost city had ever actually existed. But their faith was rewarded. After 1,000 years, the fell winter had passed. The snows are receding, and Felstad has been uncovered. Its buildings lie in icy ruin, overrun by undead creatures and animated constructs, the legacy of the Empire's experiments. It is an evil, dangerous place. To the few hardy souls who inhabit the nearby village, the city has acquired a new name, Frostgrave. It is shunned by all right-thinking people. For those who seek power and riches, however, it is an unparalleled opportunity, a deadly maze concealing secrets of knowledge long forgotten. Oh, sorry. to me that's so you couldn't quite read along, but I think that's a really nice thematic introduction to the setting itself. So this is a lost city, and lost city I think works a lot better than dungeon where creatures live and exist and you have to go stab them and steal things from them. So this is an abandoned ruin that used to be a city of magic, and now you're scavenging in through what's left. So the things that exist are kind of the encroachment of monsters and nature that would naturally live there, as well as the remnants of the magical constructs. So I think it's nice. It's not as cutthroat in tone as something like Moortime. So I think it's a nice way to explain the setting. It's kind of a magic retrieval. So here's the foreword and description of why this game and kind of what the inspirations are. So let's see if there's anything. I think we're good. Yeah, so Shane Hensley wrote the foreword. So the president of Pinnacle Entertainment. Oh yeah, so the creator of Deadlands. Oh wow, that's great. Wrote the foreword, and here's a nice piece of art. There's really great illustrations for Frostgrave. They did a nice job. So this gives you an idea of, if you want to build terrain, kind of how you should be thinking of it. The look of it. So it's a frozen city. It's a city in ruin, but also covered in ice and just started to kind of recede or thaw out. So here we go. So here's the introduction to the concept. So warbands, wizards and warbands. So Frostgrave is a narrative game, and so we gave you the kind of introduction to that narrative, in which players take the roles of powerful wizards and lead small warbands into the frozen ruins of Felstad to search for lost treasure, enchanted artifacts, and forgotten secret magics. So in this book, you'll find all the information you need to play. Yeah, and so Frostgrave games are generally quick, and that's a nice thing about this. You can get bogged down. I think Kill Team and things, games stretched out a surprising amount of time, but even just our very first second edition game was only 2 hours, and that was very satisfying because it was a complete game. Like nothing like mechanically crazy happened. No board wipes or anything. No tabled sides, and it still was a full experience and only took 2 hours. So I think that's a great compliment to the kind of the economy and mechanics of the game itself. So it's a competitive game between 2 or more players, less concerned with being a tactical exercise and more interested in helping players achieve a shared sense of fun and adventure as their wizards battle their way through numerous dangers of the frozen city. So through a lot of the different scenarios, it's not just player versus player. There's objectives that you're trying to achieve, and you're just trying to kind of get in each other's way, and trying to get the most off the board for yourself. So the winning, there's not victory points for winning a scenario. There's just what you were able to recover, and also experience for your wizard. Like, depending on things, if you killed a certain creature or a construct, there are certain things that give you extra XP. And and I think that was a big difference between first and second edition that I forgot to. I don't think it came up in any of the chapter headings, but I think previously killing the other wizard or apprentice was worth XP, and I think that's been changed in second edition so that you're not gunning for there's no kind of bounty on the other on the other warbands, and it takes away the incentive just to wipe them off the board. The only reason you'd want to do that is if they're in your way. So let's see. Yeah, so just reinforcing the idea of it's social activity, and please have fun. Don't flip the tables. So here's more of the miniatures with some nice thematic scenery. So yeah, we took a quick look at this. So why the second edition? Let's see. Yeah, and so we'll take a look at the appendices in the back, and kind of what you would need to do to use older books if you have those, if you played first edition and you're curious about this. So what you will need to play. So to play Frostgrave, you will need several things besides this book: a table, miniature figures, a tape measure, a ruler marked in inches, a couple of 20-sided dice, and a copy of the wizard sheet from the back of the book, and a pencil. So ideally you'll have some terrain pieces. So it's important in this game, even though you're playing on smaller tables, because it's maybe only 1v1, that you block line of sight, because so many of the spells depend on line of sight, and so many of the warband can fire arrows or crossbows or things. So the idea, or what kind of creates the strategy and how you move through the ruins, and it is a collapsed city, so of course there'd be a lot of things to climb over and in the way, but blocking line of sight is important. So you should have a lot of terrain to kind of get in the way, a lot of scatter terrain, and even some things for elevation, because there are rules for climbing and falling and things that will help make that more fun and interesting. And there also are spells where you can manipulate. You can magically push and do things that could cause damage if someone was above you. So that's very fun. All right, so the miniatures are the lifeblood of tabletop wargaming. Essentially, they are toy soldiers made out of metal, resin, or plastic, and like we said, the North Star Miniatures are the company that they're doing their kind of official Frostgrave. So they'll have, a miniature that will represent every school of magic, every type of soldier, very specifically. But you can find your own, or you may have your own from previous armies, fantasy armies and things that will work very well. And I mean, if you are not interested in the miniatures hobby at all, I mean, you can use meeples. You can do a lot of things. If being miniature agnostic, that takes away the miniature hobby as much as you want to. I mean, with the Lego minifigures, you're just assembling them. You're not, having to paint or do much else beyond that. So it's completely up to you, like how invested you want to get, because you can even just use a set of wooden blocks would create excellent terrain, line of sight blocking terrain, and give you elevations. So, you can go as little or as much into this as you want. But I think a big part of the fun and a big reason that this game caught on is because it let people kit bash and pull out some of their old favorite, metal miniatures and things that they haven't used in a long time, and gave you a reason to kind of get back into the hobby, but not have to paint 100 of anything, since it's not a mass battle game. So let's see. So yeah, just talking about the miniatures. So yeah, essentially the North Star figures are their official miniatures, who they support, and who, like I said, it corresponds, the sets that they do correspond most directly to the scenarios and the narrative of this book. But it's designed to use any 28 millimeter miniatures. They just have to represent. Well, the setting assumes that all the wizards are humans. The rules don't care if your warband is elves, orcs, dwarves, dwarves, or any other anthropomorphic mice. Yeah, so anything you have. If you have mice and mystic miniatures, you can do a whole warband of anthropomorphic mice. So whatever you'd like to play, you can play. And there are so many systems since the original Frostgrave. I think there's so many systems that are doing that now, and even things like Gaslands that let you kit bash and put glue guns onto your Hot Wheels. So I think a lot of the enjoyment of this is a smaller scale. Building a small group of miniatures and kind of going back into a hobby that you may have not have time for anymore, and because it's a smaller scale, it works. All right, so the bases are between 25 to 32 millimeter, and just about anything works. I'll show you how big our bases were for Lego, and it still worked fine. So the base size makes a little difference because you're measuring in inches. All right, so Frostgrave uses treasure tokens, so you'll need some bases of that size, and they recommend even using coins or shiny paper to represent that, but they need to be the size of a standard base because you do need to be in contact and an action to pick them up. They should kind of correspond. And then the dice. So many of the actions you will need, such as casting and fighting, require die rolls, and it's the D20. So I remember there was a little bit of discussion in first edition that people aren't happy with the kind of the shifting shifting fate, the shifting luck of D20, because you can fumble, a lot, things swing, I guess, of the die rolls, the randomness. But I think it works really well, especially when the magic is dangerous and you hurt yourself for missing cast and then have to decide if you want to give up life to be successful. So I think it works well, but there was some talk of people trying to group the kind of control the randomness and mitigate what a D20 does and doing like 3d6s or something. But I think I've had a lot of fun with the D20s, and the big misses are really fun and really game changing. So I like that. I like that a lot. So each player will need at least one D20. And then the table. So games of Frostgrave are normally played on a square table about 3 feet long. Games with more than 2 players, you may want to go to 4x4. So that's what we were doing for our games of 3. And but our campaign now is 3x3, which works well because the ranges, like right away, if there's not line of sight, you can get pretty quickly into range, so you can be casting on the first turn, which is fun instead of having a couple turns of just setup. And you can even play with the game smaller. So a 2x2 is probably the minimum, and smaller tables tend to be very quick because immediately everything is within range. So it'd be very quick. And I was just reading Forbidden Psalm, and Forbidden Psalm is played on 2x2, so that makes it very deadly. But every range in Forbidden Psalm is 12 inches, so you don't you're not immediately shooting all the way across the board. So all ranges are 12 inches in that system. So 2x2 works well. But 3x3 is a really satisfying range, and it lets you put a lot of terrain on the table, and it's still easy to reach over and much nicer than a 4x6. All right, and then here's their talk about terrain. So the frozen city is a twisting maze of ruin and rubble. So to represent this, you should fill it with terrain. So broken walls and things. And that was the nice thing, is I cut up a bunch of foam and made walls and things from foam, and then just kind of dusted them with some white, just different white material to make it look like snow and ice. So it works really well. It's easy to make things look icy. All right, you can even, like talking about even use blocks. So it just has to be something that will create cover, block line of sight, and you can kind of gradually build that up. And then there will be scenarios that will kind of ask for different things, like there'll be maybe a centerpiece or something that you will need. So you can kind of gradually build that up as you play the various scenarios. You don't have to, build everything you're going to need all at once, just gradually continue. And then the wizard sheet is in the back, so you keep track of all of your, we'll just flip real quick to it so you get a visual sense. Right. So just like this, there's your wizard sheet. So yeah, so as you can imagine, just the recording your wizard, apprentice, and the property, the contents of your home base, your vault, your treasury, and then a list of your spell levels, and then all of your warband. So I guess it's wizard sheets, actually. You could do it two-sided, but it's probably best to have everything on one-sided sheet. So it'll be three sheets. So one for your spells, one for your warband, and then one for what your wizard is doing and his base. So you can print those. Those are, of course, available for free as PDFs, or if you have a PDF version of the book, you can just print those last pages. And there are numerous fan-created wizard sheets floating around. So if you want a different style or look, or you just want a different organization, you want things to be more readable or more, at hand. There's another nice piece of art. All right. So creating the wizard. So the wizard is basically your main, the leader. So always in the old skirmish games, you must have one and only one. So this is that figure, your wizard. So before you can play Frostgrave, you must create your wizard. So on the wizard sheet, name your wizard, and then determine the type. This is the school of magic. So there are 10 different schools of magic, and each they did a nice job of kind of balancing the affinities, or the like which are opposed schools and which schools have some sort of affinity for each other. So each school has strengths and weaknesses, and so your decision should be based on what kind of magic appeals to you. So there's aggressive, attacking magic, there's defensive magic, there's just manipulation, buffing, and manipulation. So basically the wizard doesn't ever have to use any sort of attack spell. They can just buff armor and weapons of their warband, and they can do all the fighting. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you want to play. So if you want to throw fireballs or call down lightning, you want to play an elementalist. If you want to do trickery or misdirection, then an illusionist. So we'll take a look at the schools of magic, and see that there's a lot of variation, and also a lot of ways to kind of combine those different things. You can actually confine people and set them up to be shot at by different spells, or use your spells only to push your warband into position and speed them out off the board with treasure chests. So there's a lot of variation there that's really fun. All right, so the 10 different wizard types are listed below. So yeah, the relationships between the schools. So each one has a different relationship to the other 9 schools. Through will be aligned, neutral towards 5, and then there will be one that is directly opposed. So you cannot use opposed spells from a school of magic. So if there are certain types of spells that you want, you shouldn't choose a school that's directly opposed, because you won't have any access to that school. And so being neutral or aligned determines how difficult it is for you to cast those spells from the school that you're based in. So for simplicity's sake, the same word is used for both types of wizards in the School of Magic. So technically, a Necromancer's School of Magic is necromancy, but players are free to use either term. So Necromancer School or necromancy. So wizards, the wizard takes one look at the violet pool and sees all the bodies and bits of bodies floating in it. Then she hands me a jar and says, "Get a sample." That's the apprentice, the flavor text for the apprentice. Okay, so here are the wizard types we'll go through. Each of these with a little description and kind of show you how the alignments work. So Chronomancer. So Chronomancers use magic to manipulate time itself. The youngest branch of magic, it is less developed and less understood than others. So there's no specific style of dress. Oh, that's right. They also describe how these wizards tend to look. So in your choosing or painting a miniature, it kind of helps give you some guidance to look like a Chronomancer, how you would look. And there is no. They tend to like outfits that project a sense of power and often carry intimidating weapons. There we go. And they also are likely to appear ancient as likely to appear ancient as eternally young. So some may display elements of both, a young face and an old body. Oof, nice. So also known as time riders. Symbols are the hourglass and wheels, and that was something I think they got rid of on the spell cards. They had nice symbols. Yeah, they just list the school now. But in the first edition, they had nice symbols for each of the schools. And you had to learn those, but they were fun and kind of thematic. So they are aligned with Elementalist, Necromancer, and Soothsayer, opposed to Enchanters. And so you can see that's the difficulty. So aligned only is a +2 to use those schools of magic. Neutral's +4, and opposed is +6. So I guess you can cast those spells. So if you get them through a grimoire or a scroll, you can cast those spells, but you can't choose them. You're only choosing aligned and neutral spells. And we'll get to that when they show you the spell list. So Elementalists are the most outwardly powerful of the wizards, centered, of course, around the 4 elements. So facial tattoos are not uncommon. So they can specialize in control of fire, may have short tempers, and so they are water, wind, and earth. All of the 4 basic elements. So often called mages, earth mage, wind mage, fire mage. And their symbols are depictions of the 4 elements. So aligned with Chronomancer, Enchanter, and Summoner, and opposed to Illusionist. And then Enchanter. So enchanters are hands-on wizards who work their magic by investing it in objects or people. So many enchanters are also craftsmen, such as carpenters or sculptors. So enchanters often are the least wizardly looking, and they can carry craftsmen's tools. So transmuter or imbuer are the other names, and then the symbols can be just hand tools. So they're aligned with elementalists, sigilists, and witches, and opposed to chronomancers. So the illusionist. Illusionists sometimes are derided for being mere stage magicians. Experienced illusionists can be a dangerous foe. Illusionists use magic to fool the senses. So they often use colorful, bright, multicolored robes and hats, and may carry weapons, but prefer to produce things out of thin air. So conjurers or prestidigitators. Mirrors and rainbows are the symbol, and they're aligned with sigilists, soothsayers, and thaumaturges, and opposed to elementalists. And so here's some examples of the kind of look and feel of the how the Northstar miniatures look. Necromancer. So this is what I played in the first edition. So I wanted to raise all kinds of extra support for the Warband. So necromancers study magic associated with death, as well as the creation and control of undead creatures such as zombies and animated skeletons. They wear dark colors, of course. They're not necessarily evil, but they have delved deeply into this school of magic, giving them a corrupting influence. So death mages is the other name, and then skulls and bones and scythes and sickles are their symbols, aligned with chronomancers, summoners, and witches, and opposed to thaumaturges. All right, the sigilist. So this is what I'm playing now as a dwarf. I thought it'd be kind of, nicely thematic for a dwarf. So sigilists work magic through reading and writing. They are the masters of language and living, both living and dead. the mystical patterns of writing of all types they use, most famously the writers of magic scrolls. And they're physically weak and bookish wizards. They tend to not carry weapons other than staves. So rune readers or scribes, they're also called, and then quills and runes are their symbols. So they're aligned with enchanters, illusionists, and thaumaturges, and opposed to summoners. The Soothsayer. So the subtle magic of the Soothsayer allows the wizard to extend the senses beyond their body, including through time itself. They can reach into the past and learn secrets of history or gaze into the future to catch a glimpse of things to come. They can even reach into the minds of others. Nice. They're almost always very pale and possess a distant, empty gaze. So they collect items of clothing for different histories, so they tend to wear an odd mix of clothing and equipment. So also known as seers or fortune tellers, the 5-pointed star and crystal balls are their symbols. Yeah, so definitely carrying a crystal ball or like a palantir is a good type of figure for that. So aligned Chronomancer, Illusionist, and Thaumaturge, and opposed is Witch. And then Summoner. Summoners work their magic by opening doorways to different planes of existence. They usually bring forth creatures from those other planes to use as servants. Although they're not limited to this school of magic, it is perhaps worth mentioning the term demon refers to any being from another plane. So demons are not necessarily evil, nor do they have horns or hooves. But they're rarely happy with being summoned. So they don't talk about what summoners look like at all. Just how demons are part of their life. So Diabolist or Demonologist are the AKAs, and pentagrams and concentric circles. So they're aligned with elementalists, necromancers, and witches, opposed to sigilists. Nice. Oh, excellent. There's a nice piece of art. Oh, and this looks like what's the time? Sorry, the Chronomancer. Yeah, this looks like a Chronomancer because I'm just guessing because of the symbol, the kind of hourglass looking symbol, but it could as easily be, because it's also like the sun, so it could be a thaumaturge. Thaumaturge draws their magic from positive energy. Most, though not all, believe the energy comes from a form of deity. These wizards are healers and protectors and often spend much of their time doing good works. They rarely carry any weapons besides a staff. So nothing aggressive. This is not to say that they're pacifists, but they avoid displays of force. In appearance, they usually wear plain simple robes and tend to favor hoods over hats. And so Invoker or Wonder Worker. Oh, no, there we go. The sun in triangles. Yeah, so this is a thaumaturge. Sorry, I thought that was an hourglass, but the sun is their symbol, so that's definitely a art for the thaumaturge. And so aligned with, so they're Invokers or Wonder Workers, and Illusionists, Sigilists, and Soothsayer are there aligned, and then opposed to Necromancer. And then Witch. Witch draws the subtle power from nature and magic and specializes in brewing potions and casting curses, seeking aid from plants and animals. So contrary to popular belief, witches are not ugly old women and can be found amongst all ages and genders. All right. So Warlock, Hedge, Wizard, Witch Doctor. Symbols are crescent moons, bats, and cat's eyes. So aligned with enchanters, necromancers, and summoners, and opposed to soothsayers. So those are all of our schools. So sorry if that was a little tedious, but I want to give you like a nice overview of everything. So it's nice and balanced. There's, magic of light, magic of darkness, magic of nature, and then summoning as well. And also the constructs are built. The enchanters. Enchanters build the constructs. So there are those you will also encounter, like magically animated creatures. So choosing spells. So on the wizard sheet is a complete list of spells. Yeah, so they show you everything that's possible, and you should go through and kind of, write what you're aligned with and what you're neutral with, so you have an idea of -2, -4, -6. So you build a spell list. So you begin knowing 8 spells. 3 come from your own school of magic. So whatever you chose. So those don't have a penalty. There's no penalty for casting those. 1 must come from each of the aligned schools. So you notice each of them are aligned to 3 other schools. So the aligned schools, you get 1 of each. So that's already 6. And then the 2 final spells can come from any of the 5 neutrals, but they must come from a different school each. So you get 2 more spells, and they can be from the 5 neutrals. So there's a lot of strategy in choosing spells and finding some synergies and kind of adapting this spell list to your play style. You'll really want to things you want to do in combat. If you don't want to just burn people alive, then you don't want to choose a lot of fireballs and lightning bolts, because that only gives you a certain you're only attacking and you're only offensive, using offensive magic. So that's really an interesting way. And of course, more powerful spells are harder to cast. And so if they're outside of your school, they can be very hard to cast. So it's not a great idea to choose things that you may never be able to successfully cast and may only damage you in the attempt. So all starting wizards have 3 spells from their own. And we went through that. Starting wizards never have a spell from their opposing school, although they can learn later, but of course it's at a -6. So when the spell is selected, you write the casting number in the space next to each of the spells. I'm sorry, it's, the penalty is a plus because you're trying to roll under. So, So when the spell is written, you write the casting number next to it on the wizard sheet. For starting wizards, this number will be the base casting number because you can upgrade that number with the XP, but you will have not done that in the very beginning. So an elementalist attempting a spell being attempted by a Soothsayer will have a +4 next to it. So you add 4 to that roll when you're casting it. So when you participate in scenarios, you can use XP to change that casting number. And so here's the basic stat line, and it's pretty standard from a lot of miniatures games. So you have a move stat, a fight stat, a shoot, an armor, a will, and a health. So every miniature on the table will have its own stat line, whether it's a creature, a wizard, or a soldier. So movement is a movement in inches. Fight is your hand-to-hand ability, and also your ability to avoid missile fire. So kind of like your dodge as well. So fight goes against shooting attacks. Shoot is the character's ability to use missile weapons such as bows and crossbows, and it doesn't influence spells. It does not influence spells which generate shooting attacks. And then armor is how much physical protection you're wearing. So usually, based on shield or the armor, or even magical protection, and includes any natural armor. The willpower is your figure's determination or courage, ability to resist spells. So a lot of things like mind control and things will be against a will roll. And then health is just the toughness of your figure, before how many points they can lose before they are wounded or killed. So here's an example of a standard stat line, and you can see the fight and shoot are pluses, and also will as well. So that's to your roll. Those are how you modify your roll. Oh, and there's also, that's right. So some things will generate a split stat. So there's kind of 2 conditions or 2 reasons why you would either use the first or the second number. And so sometimes spells or equipment or things will force you to do that. So you might have like a +2, +3 based on certain conditions. So you may have some stats that are written as actually two values. So items, all wizards, apprentices, and soldiers they have at least 1 slot for carrying an item. Wizards have 5, apprentices have 4, and soldiers have 1. So these are things, like potions and things that can be used as actions, or have some give you some benefit during the game. So in the beginning, you may choose the general arms and armor from the list, but you may not wear any type of armor or carry shields that interfere with spellcasting for your wizard. And in a campaign, wizards can change their items after each game, especially if they find like a magical staff or a potion or something, and use that in the next game. So, and that's it for creating a wizard. So now that you have your wizard, and you've chosen your spells and kind of decided how you want to play, what your magic will do, now it's the Warband. So everyone starts out with 400 gold crowns. So that's your budget for assembling your team and equipping them. So you hire your followers and treasure hunters. So generally, a warband consists of maximum 10 figures, a wizard, an apprentice, and then 8 soldiers. And there's a few rules that allow you to have additional, and I think that's why I favored the Necromancer, because you can, when you raise zombies and demons and things, they didn't count towards that total. So I think I was rolling with 12, 12 miniatures at one point. All right, so the term spellcaster is used throughout the book. So that means all wizards and apprentices, so anybody that can cast a spell. All right, so here's your apprentice. And so like we talked about with the apprentice, they cost 100. So out of your 400, 100 goes immediately to your apprentice. So that might make you consider, do I really need a lesser spellcaster? But a couple of important things, like I said, it's to be able to try spells twice and be able to cast twice in a turn is a huge deal, even if it is a little harder. And so that money is well spent. And also, if your wizard is killed and removed from the game, your apprentice can rise to the occasion and become your wizard. So you're not completely eliminated, from play or from a campaign. So they offer a huge degree of tactical flexibility and are the only way to have a second spellcaster. Also, not having an apprentice does not increase the number of soldiers a wizard is allowed to have in their warband. Oh, interesting. So you can still only have 8. So even if you don't take an apprentice, you only have 8 soldiers. And the other thing too is, if you looked when we're going through the table of contents, the different phases of play, there's an apprentice phase. So that means that your opponent will always get to do something and you do nothing because you don't have an apprentice. So yeah, it's something that you may be able to work around. There may be strategies that can be apprenticeless, but I don't know. I think it would be more trouble than it's worth to try to build around that. And I always like having the worried or apprentice miniature carrying a stack of books or something. That always is a nice look on the table. Okay, so essentially the apprentice is learning from the wizard, learning their trade. And if the wizard is good at something, the apprentice will be too. But as the wizard gets better, so will the apprentice. So to determine the stat line for the apprentice, you just use the wizard's stat line with the following modifications. So they have the same movement as the wizard, 2 less in fight, the same shooting as the wizard, the same armor, 2 less in will, and 2 less in health. So it's just a worse version, of your wizard. So based on their starting stats, and the starting stats for each of or I guess the wizards all start with the same. And so things will modify that, based on how they're equipped and certain magical items and things. Nice. Yeah, so there's a lot of seeking treasure chests. So here is members of your warband. Thieves and thugs and all those wonderful types. So there are items. So apprentices, like we read, have 4 items slots. So that's a lot that they can carry. So, potions and scrolls and things. But apprentices may not wear any armor or carry a shield like your wizard. Apprentice spells, so when they're learning magic from the wizard, so it's going to be the same spell list. It is only necessary to keep track of one set of spells because it's a shared spell list. However, the apprentice is still learning, so everything is -2. So they can cast anything that the wizard can cast, but as a -2 penalty. So a lot of out-of-game spells, it's good to maybe try it with your apprentice first, and then if they fail, then you can try more, assuredly with your wizard. And so then to round out the rest of the warband are the soldiers. So with the rediscovery of Frostgrave, several boom towns formed around the outskirts of the city, and these were lawless places that teem with men and women hoping to join a wizard to find riches in the ruins. So soldiers do not possess a high level of training or specific skills. Oh, the ones that do are specialist soldiers. So specialist soldiers they cost money, and but they have better stats or can equip certain weapons. So we'll take a look at that. Yeah, so wizards are rarely interested in the martial arts. Okay, so I hope this is readable enough. I'm trying to avoid the glare as much as possible. So each wizard may recruit up to 8 soldiers to join the warband. Maximum of 4 can be specialists. So of those 8, so here's your standard soldiers here, and then here's your specialists. And so we'll take a look at what those differences mean. So only half of that 8 can be specialists. And basically with your starting money, even if you don't take an apprentice, you can't afford to do more than 4 anyhow. So each soldier, in the notes, they show the standard gear that they're equipped with. So each soldier has a standard set of equipment, and they can, of course, their stats can be improved, but only through magic or magic items. They don't level. I think there's things that happen in expansions. I think captains and things may have changed that rule. But as it stands in the core rules, they don't improve except by magical means. All right. So they have a standard set of equipment as listed in the notes. They may not be given any additional items from the general arms and armor list. Should a soldier ever lose one of these standard items in the course of an adventure, they will receive a free replacement. Each soldier has only one slot where they can carry a potion, a magic weapon, a magic item. A soldier may carry a magic item and wear magic armor if it is the same type as listed in their notes. So a thief equipped with a dagger is standard, so they can use a magic dagger, but they can't use magic armor or a sword. All right, so the stats are given for each soldier with bonuses or penalties based on their type. And so we'll take a quick look here if I can get this up looking at you. So a thug, a thief, a warhound, an infantryman, man-at-arms, and apothecary. So the first 2, thieves and thugs, are free. And you'll notice the difference is thieves don't fight as well, but they move a little bit faster. So they've got a 7 movement, so they can kind of get around much faster. But otherwise, they're very similar. Warhound is very fast, but because it is an animal, it can't grab treasure. It can basically just engage quickly with monsters or other warbands. An infantryman has a better fight, but also costs 50 gold. Warhound is 10 gold. But infantrymen can have the 2-handed weapon and light armor. Man-at-arms is a good fighter, heavier armor, better will, and better health, but also 75 gold crowns. And they can take a hand weapon, a shield, and then light armor. And the apothecary can not do very much, has high will, high health, 75 gold crowns, and also comes with a health potion. So they can be your healer. And then when we look at the specialists, so specialists will also give you a lot more specialized weapons. So the archer will give you a bow, and they have a +2 shoot, and otherwise are pretty standard soldiers. A crossbowman has a +2 shoot as well, but the crossbow is a bit deadlier. Yeah, otherwise they're the same. The treasure hunter is 100 gold crowns. They have a hand weapon and a dagger, but they have high will and high health. Oh, and also high movement. So it's like a paid thief, and also with a +3. Fight a tracker is similar, and comes with a bow. Yeah, a bow and a staff, and yeah, light armor, and so faster like a thief. Slower is the knight, but with higher fight, high armor, and higher health. Templar is more of the same, except they have two-handed weapons, so the knight is one-handed with a shield. Templars are two-handed. A ranger is a bow, but also very fast-moving, but also 125. Yeah, once you're into the over 100, you don't want them to die. Barbarian is a good fighter, low armor, of course, but high health, and they can carry two-handed. And then the marksman is a crossbow, slow moving, good fighter, and good shooting, of course. So yeah, as you can see, there's a whole range of prices, and after your apprentice, you only have 300, so you're not gonna be able to go crazy. So it's good that you can fill the ranks with free thugs and thieves, depending on how you want to balance things out. And then as you accumulate wealth, you can go to the full 4 specialists. Okay, so Warhound. As animals, Warhounds cannot pick up treasure tokens and have no item slots. So they're basically just running interference. And apothecaries can start a game with a potion of healing. An apothecary may spend an action to give a potion to a member within an inch, provided neither are in combat, and the figure receiving the potion counts as having drunk it, and the effects apply immediately. So immediately gets healing. So this applies to any potion carried, not just the free healing potion. All right. So creatures in Warband. So this is a bit new. So some spells, I guess this is just clarifying the rules, like I was talking about with zombies and skeletons and things in the Necromancer. So some spells and a few magic items allow wizards to include creatures in their warbands. Creatures include anything listed in the bestiary, and a specific spell or item will state if the creature becomes a temporary or permanent part of the warband. If it's temporary, then it does not count towards the maximum amount. Essentially, if an extra member will join for one game only. If it's a permanent member, then it takes the place of a soldier and counting towards your maximum warband size. Among the spells are several control spells. Control construct, undead, control animal, or demon. Figures affected by this control spell are also temporary, so they don't need to make room. A spellcaster may only control one creature at a time. Figures that are permanent members of a warband never count against the control limit, even if it's the same type. So regardless of whether the creature is permanent or temporary, it follows the same rules as soldiers, especially when it's activating. All right, so here's the general arms and armor list. And so just the description. And so you have basically a standardized idea of like how a dagger, a hand weapon, two-handed weapon. So they break them into categories, and you get so daggers are always -1 to damage, but it does not take up an item slot. And then hand weapons are just no damage modifiers. Two-handed weapons are +2 damage. Staves are -1 damage. However, they also give the opponent a -1 damage modifier. And then bows, the ranged weapons are 24. So 24-inch range. And there's no modifiers. They must also carry a quiver, so it will take up their 1 item slot. So they can't carry a potion or anything if they've got a bow. And the crossbow takes an action to load. So you need to have 1 action. So you can't move or can't fire if you need to reload. But you do have +2 to damage. So that's pretty big if you hit. That can be brutal. And it is assumed that the crossbow starts loaded. And in order to use a crossbow, you must carry a quiver. So quivers are necessary for any range, and that will take away your ability to carry other things. But you've got 24 inches of ranged attack. So the other types of combat or equipment are unarmed. So -2 damage to unarmed attacks. A shield will give you +1 armor. Light armor is +1. And heavy armor is +2, but movement -1. And spellcasters cannot wear any armor. So permanent warband members may never have an armor stat greater than 15. If any combination of items, magic, and special effects would take them above 15, treat it as 15 instead. Creatures are not subject to this limitation. All right, so here's your stats, the damage modifiers, everything we just kind of went through, and plus details about you can't carry a shield with a two-handed weapon, all that good stuff. Whoa, and there's a Yeti. Yeah, the photography is great of the miniatures. It makes you want to play immediately. All right, so the second chapter gets you through setting up the table and turn order and how to get completely started. All right, so playing the game. So now you have your wizard and your warband. You're ready to put some miniatures on the table. So setting up the table, like they said, they recommend 3x3, 4x4 for more than 2 players, and 2x2 if you want to go crazy and play a quick, deadly game. So you can roll randomly to determine what scenario. You can just play through them in order because they kind of build in complexity. And in each scenario, it will tell you how to set up the terrain, where or how to place the treasure tokens, and what kind of creatures may be wandering in there. And so special rules and things. So some scenarios, like they want you to use certain creatures or not, or roll on a certain table to generate, if you're going to generate random encounters of monsters. So they also say that alternatively, just ignore the scenarios and play a standard game. So a standard game is just, the certain number. So put down terrain, put down the standard number of treasure tokens, and then just go for it. So it's just important that there's a lot of terrain on the table. So it should be crowded, leaving few areas or avenues of open ground, giving the figures plenty of places to hide and take cover, and it shouldn't be possible for a figure on the ground to draw a line of sight to any point more than a foot or so away. So I think that's very important because you have 24-inch ranges on a lot of spells. Immediately, you shouldn't be able to be shooting all the way across the board. If you double move on one turn, and then you can just hit every spot on the board for the rest of the game. So once the terrain is set up, you should place the 5 treasure tokens. So standard is 5. According to rules, there's a central treasure, and then the other treasures are placed 8 inches from the central and no closer than 6 inches to each other. So that's very standard. And so there can be anywhere on the table, provided there is no more than 9 inches from any table edge. Because to claim a treasure, you need to take it off of a table edge. So if it's closer than 9 inches, that's going to be very easy to do. So you also count the vertical distance if you're going to put something on an elevation, a vertical distance when measuring between the tokens. So that's it. So 5 treasure tokens, following those rules, and enough terrain to block line of sight, and you're ready to go with just a simple game of get as much treasure as possible. So try the corners. So in games where you're playing in a very small table, like a 2x2, it might be better for the warbands to start selecting corners instead of edges. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, a 4-way game on a 3x3 might be good for corners instead. Yeah, that's a good suggestion, because small tables, if you're going along the edge, that's going to get it's going to go quickly. Okay, so here's the turn order and the phases of or the turn and what you do within those phases in a turn. So at the beginning of each turn, you roll initiative, And then we have these set of phases that you can do certain things during. So a wizard phase means your wizard moves, and they can do a group activation with up to, so their choice of, so 0 to 3 soldiers that are within 3 inches and line of sight of the wizard may also activate during this time. So you can kind of keep a little group of, bodyguards or assistants around you as a wizard and activate them all together. So they all have to, the wizard doesn't have to move first, but they all have to have done their activation in that turn, no kind of partial or anything. If you no longer have a wizard on the table, which can happen, you don't do anything in this phase. And then the Apprentice Phase comes, and the same rules apply. 0 to 3 within 3 inches activate. So there is almost all of your, well, that can be all of your warband, because it's no, I mean there'll be 2 left, 10 altogether, but the wizard and apprentice and 3 and 3, so there's 8 already. So you only have 2 soldiers that cannot move within these first 2 turns. And then the soldier phase, so it's everybody that didn't get in on the group activations. So anything that's not a magic user that's also not within 3 and part of a group will be moving. And so then alternating between the player that won the initiative and the player that lost the initiative goes next. And then creatures. So finally the creatures. So during this phase, all uncontrolled creatures are activated in the same manner. So basically the roaming monsters or anything that doesn't belong to a warband will be moved, and they follow certain rules. So the rules of movement, there's like a simple kind of AI that moves towards the nearest line of sight character. So we'll take a look at that in a bit, but some monsters are a little bit different, some creatures are a little bit different. So activation. So when a figure activates, it may perform 2 actions, one of which can only be movement. So movement and an action. The other action can consist of a second move, which is at half of your movement distance, fighting, shooting, spellcasting, or any special action listed in the book, like picking up treasure, handing a potion, all that good stuff. It does not matter if a figure moves with its first or second action, but one must be a move. Thus, for example, a figure may shoot a bow and then move, or move and then cast a spell. So if you're in a good position, you can shoot at something and then get into cover by making your movement second, but you have to move. There's no double shooting or do an action like pick up a chest token, a treasure token, and then shoot or something. You have to be moving. Let's see. So the soldiers. Oh, okay, so this is for the group activation. Activating soldiers in either the wizard or apprentice phase. If that soldier is within 3 at the beginning of the phase, and not after the wizard or apprentice has moved. Okay. So so they must move before. So a player may not move their wizard and then activate a soldier within 3. Oh, that was not in 3 when it started. I see. So to get that group activation, you can't move your wizard and then say, oh, he's within 3, so I have activated him. It has to be at the start. So that within 3 inches is at the very beginning of that phase. And then the group activation. So in the case of the group activation, you declare the group, and you must move all of the figures activating in that phase. So you cannot just move an apprentice and 1 soldier and then complete all their actions. Or actions that may normally replace a movement reloading. Yeah, so that is one of the things that can replace a movement is the reload action. But there are not many of those. So if you declare group activation, it must be possible for them all to move with the wizard. The wizard could then cast a spell, followed by the 3 soldiers taking their second actions. All right, so there are only a few instances where the group activation is useful. The most common is to allow multiple figures to gang up on a specific figure. That's right, because you can all, kind of gang rush somebody and all attack them. if they'd be in the right position. All right. Stat rolls. So there's so a target number. So during your turn, the figure may be called upon to make a roll using one of its stats. To accomplish this, if it's not covered by the general rules, so in the case you'll be told to make a stat roll, a will, or a fight with a target number of X. So X is equal to the difficulty. So if a spell or something says make a will roll target number 16, you simply roll the die and add the appropriate stat, and if it is equal to or greater than the target number, the figure has succeeded. So if the total is less, then you've failed. So yeah, you want to beat that number. For example, during the scenarios, a treasure may be located behind a barred door. To break the door, you need to spend an action and roll a fight against the door. So target 14. If you roll equal to or greater than 14, then you have successfully broken the door. Automatic successes and fails and maximum bonus. So whenever a figure makes a stat roll, an unmodified roll of a 20 is always a success. An unmodified roll of a 1 is always a failure. And the maximum bonus is cannot be greater than 10. So through all of the different things that would affect the roll, you can't ever add more than 10. So movement, so one action in your turn is always a movement, and the other can be a second movement. But the second movement is always done at half. And so sometimes you're counting, it's a little funny, like when you're, if the movement is 7, then the second move is 3.5, so you're going to be moving 10.5. So you gotta, just pay attention to that. But with inches, it's big enough that it doesn't matter. And so here's a good example of, you can see elevation in ruins. So that's line of sight, but it's also, the possibility of fall, damage, and all that good stuff. Obstructions. So movement, oh, there we go. Yeah. So figures can climb over any obstacle at the cost of 2 inches for every 1 inch of verticality. And rough ground also is more difficult to walk on. And you have to kind of make that clear when you're setting up your terrain, like with any miniatures game. When you're setting up your terrain, it's good to declare, just based on how you've designed the terrain or what you were thinking or what you can agree on, what is rough, what is an actual obstruction, and what doesn't count, because there'll be some some argument of well, that looks like rough ground, or that looks like it could block line of sight when it wasn't intended to. And figure facing. So figures in Frostgrave are always considered to be seeing in all directions and can turn to face any direction at any time. So this doesn't require an action and can be done outside of the figure's activation. So there's no flanking or rear attack or anything, because there's no figure facing. That's why I think round bases are preferred. So square bases are good if you're considering backstabs and things, but that is not part of the mechanics. So moving into combat, so if you move into contact with any enemy figure, you're considered to be in combat. You do not automatically fight. It still requires you perform a fight action. So if two figures essentially are locked up on each other, so that doesn't mean, they necessarily fight unless one of them has a free action to do so. All right. So a figure in combat may not move, shoot, cast a spell, drink a potion, reload a crossbow, or use a magic item, because they are engaged. Forcing combat. Whenever a figure moves within an inch, that is currently free to move, you can force the combat. So the enemy figure is immediately moved into contact with the currently active figure, and the two are considered to be in combat. It's a good way to stick, especially with your quick dogs and beasts and animals. It's a good way to stick people into engagements. So note that uncontrolled creatures will always force combat if they have the opportunity, unless it says so in there. It says differently in their creature. Oh, there's a nice, there's really great illustrations in this book, full page. Movement by spells. So there are a few spells such as leap or teleport that allow you to move. This does not count as a movement action. They are subject to the same rules concerning multiple movements. However, movement spell that ends with within an inch of an opposing figure is subject to be forced combat. Movement off the table. If a figure chooses to move off the table, such as to secure a treasure or just to retreat from a fight, and that figure is now out of the game and may not return. So that's an important consideration. So you kind of want to use your cheap units to, your cheap soldiers, to run the treasure chests off the board, because when they take them off the board, they don't come back. So if you have your specialist heavy fighter hauling a treasure chest and they take it off and score that for you, you are down a soldier. And if it's a competent one, then that's not good. And let's see. Under temporary control of the wizard may be moved off the table, but only if they are carrying treasure. Ah, okay. Yeah, so the only reason to be moved off the board is for treasure or for to get them out if they're at 1 hit point or whatever. So when a figure is activated, but before it takes any actions, it may declare that it will run for it. The figure immediately moves up to 3 inches in any direction, ignoring all movement modifiers. After the move, its activation ends. A figure may not move within 1 inch of a figure using this rule. This rule is useful for figures that would otherwise be reduced to almost no movement, such as one carrying treasure tokens, although rough ground will suffer the same effects of poison. So a figure may not use this rule if it activates in combat in deep water or no action. Oh, interesting. So you always have a 3 inch in any direction. If you declare, you're just panicking and fleeing. Jumping. A figure may jump any distance providing it moves the equal distance in a straight line. So making up a jump, the total jump may not exceed the maximum permitted of the figure's activation. So jumping a distance does not count as a figure's total movement. So a figure that moves 2.5 in a straight line and then jumps 2.5, the same line may continue if it has a movement greater than 5. Jumping. So you don't always need ladders and stuff to get up on places. And here's fall damage. So falls less than 3 inches have no effect, but everything over that you need to calculate equal to the number of inches it fell, modified by 1.5 rounded down. So that means a figure falling 5 inches suffers 7 damage. Yeah, so multiply the amount that you've fallen over that's over 3 inches. And there is your damage. Swimming. Yeah, this wasn't in first edition. And I guess there'll be more water. A lot of standing water. Not a lot of standing water. Mostly it's frozen. That's right. We haven't gotten to any water yet. But still. So 2 types, shallow and deep. Oh, interesting. And armor will modify that. Swimming. So a swim rule. The figure must pass a will roll and take into account modifiers on the swimming table. Oh, all right. It's a special version of a stat roll. Wow. And creatures with aquatic, amphibious, ethereal, and flying will never intentionally enter deep water. All right, so here's the combat. Okay, combat rules. So once the figures are in combat, they may spend 1 action to fight. So the fight is a combat roll, and so they roll fight stats against each other. So the figure with the higher score wins the fight and may inflict damage to the opponent. To determine the damage, the winning figure takes its combat roll, adds any damage modifiers by its weapon granted by its weaponry, and subtracts the loser's armor stat. So if you roll very high, plus your damage bonus, and they don't have significant armor, you can do, a ton of damage to an unarmored figure. So, the magic user, the apprentice, and the wizard can take a lot of damage because it's that combat roll that is the base for your damage plus your bonus. Yeah, so this can get pretty brutal. And then, so anything that's over the armor that isn't eliminated by armor comes off of your health. In some rare cases, the attack may include a damage multiplier. Oh, that's right, like an ice toad or some things, yeah, aren't just a damage bonus, they're a multiplier. So it's pretty brutal. But it's a very, very straightforward, very clear, easy to deal with combat. So fight versus fight, and whoever wins does the damage minus the armor. So sometimes, very heavily armored characters, you're not going to do. It's very difficult to do anything. You just do a couple of points every time, even if you have a major, a major combat roll. And then after the combat, you can. The winner gets to determine if they want to remain in combat or push back. And push back means they move an inch out, so they, get out of engagement, basically. So they can decide if they want to, run away or whatever on their next activation, depending on what they want to do. Multiple combats. So for every supporting friendly figure you get into combat with an enemy with, you get a +2 modifier to... what are you getting it to? To your, is it for the attack? Yeah, so everyone in the attack gets a +4, and it is cumulative, but only up, yeah, it is cumulative. Damage they cancel. Oh, so, but if both figures get +2, then it just is canceled out. And you can never have more than, even if you've got four or five people attacking, you never get more than +6. So here's a diagram to kind of show you their examples of what they mean and how you would determine what kind of combat modifiers they're getting. So the summary of combat is they both make a combat roll, they add the fight stat, and any other modifiers from magic weapons or supporting figures. Determine the winner by comparing the two combat rolls with all the modifiers. Highest wins. Add your damage modifier to that roll. So two-handed weapons get 1, daggers -1. And then you subtract the armor of the person being hit and then apply any damage modifiers. And if the final is greater than 0, then subtract that many points from the loser's health. If it is 0 or negative, then no damage is done, and the winner now has the choice of staying in combat or pushing themselves or their opponent an inch. And critical hits, so you can, on a natural 20, you can do an additional 5. So not double damage yet, because you can't double 25. But you do, if you want to, if you like crits in combat, a natural 20 will give you +5 damage. So shooting. So if a figure is equipped with a bow or a crossbow, it may spend an action to shoot. So it must be in range and line of sight. And so, yeah, 24 inches. So line of sight is tricky in some, you want to make sure you confirm that. And then you do a shooting roll versus, so they make a shooting roll and add their shoot stat, and then the target, uses their fight stat. And then they also get any shooting defense modifiers if they have something like that. And so the higher score wins. So if the combat roll wins, then the shot misses. The damage is determined the same way based on that shooting roll, and then adding damage modifiers and subtracting the armor. All right. Oh, yeah. So when a wizard or apprentice casts a spell that generates a shooting attack, that attack follows the same rules, except the spellcaster does not apply their shoot stat to roll. Instead, they apply any bonuses indicated in the spell. So the spell will say, make a +4 shooting attack. So that is independent. So you don't refer to the shoot stat. It tells you how to modify that attack because it's a magical attack. It's not involving any dexterity or strength or aiming. All right. So, shooting defense modifiers. Yeah, so that's right. They're not things that exist. They're things that are based on cover. So every intervening terrain gives you +1. Light cover is +2. Heavy cover is +4. A hasty shot, which means they moved right before they shot, is +1. And a large target makes it easier, so -2. And shooting into combat. So it's possible for a figure to shoot. But if you wish to shoot in combat, you randomly determine who gets the attack. So first you roll the attack to see if you hit, and then you determine who got hit. So quick shooting summary. So the shooter checks the range and line of sight, declares their targets, does the shooting roll, adds everything. The target does a combat roll, adds their fight stat, and then the defense modifiers, meaning intervening terrain and all that good stuff. Determine the winner, and then minus armor and minus the and then apply the damage modifiers. All right, so damage. Yes, a poison is the new clarification. So if a figure is reduced to 0 health, the figure has been killed and should be removed from the table. And then you'll out of game do the. They may not be dead. You roll on a table to determine what happens to them. But for the purposes of the game, they're dead. They're out. And you remove them from the table so you don't loot them or haul their bodies off or anything. It's very simple. When they're 0 HP, they're gone. And you may mitigate this. So there are elemental damage or magic damage that certain items may mitigate the effects. So it may mean that the attack is both elemental. Oh, that's right. So types of attacks may also have some effect. Like some things may be blocked and some things may not be blocked based on if they're magical attacks or not. Poison. So poison is delivered in several different ways, and it takes at least 1 point of damage from the creature and is reduced. So if the creature is poisoned, that's right. So if the poison damages the creature at least 1 point, then they are poisoned. They take the kind of status of poisoned, and their actions are reduced to a single action per activation instead of 2. The action can be anything, but it does not have to be movement. The figure is cured of poison if they have any form of healing. It increases their current health. Otherwise, if they don't, it doesn't specifically say it cures poison. Poison lasts until the end of the scenario. So a figure may be recovered, but will be recovered by the start of the next game. So so poison doesn't like take away health every turn or anything. It just limits the effectiveness, efficacy of the soldier. Multiple poisonings have no additional effect because you can only have that status once. You're already down to 1 action. You're not going to have any more actions. Oh, and this is an optional rule. It's kind of interesting. If a figure is down to 4 health remaining, you can also give them that same sort of status where they can only do 1 action. So similar to poisoned, you can consider them wounded, which will do that same thing, give them only 1 action per turn. And spell casting. So here's the fun part of the combat. So wizards and apprentices can attempt to cast spells. So they may cast a spell while in combat, and they may attempt to cast a spell that they know. And there's no maximum number of times a specific spell may be cast during a game. So you can do the same spell every single turn. There's no limit to it. But scrolls are used. So scrolls are a single use of a spell, but like I said, it's a guaranteed. So the interesting thing about making scrolls of spells is it's a guaranteed successful cast, but you are spending the scroll. Okay, so you do roll a d20, and you're trying to get under, right? So you're a casting roll, and you compare it to the casting number. I'm sorry, so you're rolling over. That's right. Everything is over. So the spell roll on a d20 is equal to or greater than the casting number. So the casting number is increased. That's the negative. The casting number is increased if it's out of school, so it becomes harder to beat that number. Be aware that in some cases it is important to know the actual results of the die, not just whether or not it succeeded, because the amount that you miss by, if you're rolling less than the casting number, the spell fails and the action is lost. So the spell does not take effect, but you may suffer damage depending on how much you fail. So it's not point for point. You refer to this table. So if you're 1 to 4 off, no damage. 5 to 9 points off in your spell roll, that's 1 damage. 10 to 19 is 2. Over 20 is 5. So if you really miss big, you can take up to 5 damage. So yeah, that can add up pretty fast. A couple of real bad miscasts, and you can be hurting. And some more nice miniatures, and then excellent illustrations. So empowering spells. So after a casting roll is made and any other bonuses or modifiers are applied, before its effects are determined, you may choose to empower the spell. So on a 1-for-1 basis, you can spend your health to increase the casting roll. So if you just miss by 3, you can give 3 health, and that increases the casting number by 3, the casting roll by 3. And otherwise specified, you can never increase a casting roll above 18 for the sake of, making it more difficult or making more damage. And you can never, let's see, and out-of-game spells. So when you're doing things like brewing potions and things, you cannot empower them with your health points. Yeah, so it can't go above 18 by empowerment. Spend enough health to ensure a successful cast. A sponsor may cover to increase the roll beyond, to simply succeed. Yeah, so if that number is used to determine, of course it can't go over 18, but when you're doing things like trying to summon demons and things, the higher the better means you get, instead of a minor demon, you get a major demon when you're trying to summon. So you can do it to increase in that situation, is give more life over to make the spell more successful, of course never going over 18. And any empowerment must be done before the will roll to resist is made. Oh, I see. Yeah, so because you have to be clear, because oftentimes the will roll to resist, like sleep or mind control or something, will use the casting roll as the basis for the target number you have to beat. So you have to determine that first. And we spend health in order to, okay, so, and of course, yeah, you can use empowerment to on that table that we just looked at. If you want to avoid taking the 5 damage, empower it just 1 to turn it to 19, and then you only take the 2. So that's another good way to save yourself a couple of points. So death by spellcasting. So a spellcaster is allowed to take themselves to 0 health in order to empower a spell that will remove them, but the effects of the spell do still get determined. So for example, if a necromancer used their last point of health in order to steal health, the target would still make a will roll and take damage as normal, but the spellcast would not gain any health as they had already died. So don't do that. All right, so resisting spells, is often a will roll, and it uses the so natural 20 is a success and natural 1 is a failure, regardless of modifiers, and you're using the casting roll against canceling spells. If a spell has an ongoing effect and no duration is given, the spell cannot be canceled or undone by the spellcaster unless the spell specifically gives you the ability to do so. Generally, spells only end if specifically canceled by some effect or dispel or spell eater. Targeting figures in combat, so you roll randomly the same way you would if you're shooting into combat. Casting spells from scrolls. So a scroll can be used in 2 different ways. If the spellcaster has a scroll with a spell they don't know, they may use it to cast a spell, and they simply spend an action and the scroll is destroyed and it's successfully cast. So treat it as a casting roll of 14. So the auto success gives you 14. So for the sake of like will rolls and things, that the casting number will always be 14. If a scroll contains a spell that the caster knows, they may use it as a form of spell casting insurance. The caster may attempt to cast the spell as normal. If they fail, they may use the scroll instead, and the scroll is discarded and you use the 14 as well. But yeah, if you're successful, then yeah, you can just keep that always as a success, a guaranteed success. But of course it will be used. And potions, they are immediate and automatically successful. Nice. But you do have to use an action, and you know they take up item slots. Another excellent illustration. Collecting treasures. So treasure tokens take an action to pick up, and you are slowed. So that means if you're already carrying a shield or a two-handed weapon, your movement is halved. That's right. And then of course your fight is -1. So yeah, you're vulnerable carrying a treasure token because you're moving slower and you don't fight as well. So you would need to drop the token to be able to move and fight normally. So you just need that extra action then to reacquire it. It is worth noting that treasure tokens are not items, so they make any character can carry one regardless of how they're equipped. Creature actions. So uncontrolled creatures. So they're not okay. So creatures that are not part of a warband will never target or attack another uncontrolled creature. They are considered not in combat with each other. Nice. And they have the rules. Oh yeah, so here's your little AI for determining how to move the uncontrolled creatures. So is it in combat? Yes or no. Is it of line of sight to a member of a warband? Yes or no. And then random movement. So if none of these things will motivate it to move in any direction, then you roll a d20 and let's see. A random direction. So determine a random direction. And one way you can do that is, I'll take a quick example here. So here's a d20, and you see how, oops, each of the faces is a triangle. And so you just use the point that's facing up on the value. So you would roll it, and there's the 2, the 2, and it's pointed this way. So that's your random, the same way, I think you do that with D10s a lot. I'm trying to roll on the surface. So there's our 17 and we're pointed this way. So that kind of gives you, if you need to generate a random movement, you can kind of use that as a little bit of an indicator. So this way. So that's kind of a nice thing to do without having to pull out a template or a little diagram or anything. And ending the game. So Frostgrave ends in several ways. Most commonly, the game ends as soon as the last treasure token is moved off the board. All figures still on the table are assumed to make it home safely, and normally. Another way to end the game is if one player has a figure left on the table, it's the only one. So that's right. So all the opposing ones are killed or have left to secure treasure. So if you're the last player with soldiers still on the board, then that ends the game as well. So in that case, though, figures remaining on the table secure all the treasure that is currently being carried by members of their warband, and furthermore, they should roll dice. They roll a die for unclaimed treasure. On a 15 and up, they get to take the treasure. 14 or less, it's lost. So that's great. If you end up one of the opponents ends up bailing because they get really beaten bad in combat, or are fighting monsters the whole time, you don't automatically get everything. I think that might have been a rule in first edition, that whatever is left from whoever is remaining on the board, they get everything, but you have to make rolls for it. I can't remember specifically. But yeah, so you roll 15 and up to see if you get the remaining treasure. Now, some scenarios have specific objectives that end the game. And there is no, in a campaign, there are no specific win conditions for most scenarios. So each player is left to decide, whether their wizard won or lost, or, just kind of how you felt. And really, you can take less treasure off the board, but you can still, when you roll for what you took off the board, you can still actually do better than someone that out-tokened you, took larger tokens. So the idea of the campaign, so this is something that, this is the appeal of Necromunda and Mordheim, and all of that is the campaign, and your warband grows and changes and loses limbs and, has trauma and things between sessions. This is the really fun part of this. So to play multiple games makes it really fun. So the things that you do after you finish a scenario: injury and death, out-of-game spells, experience and leveling, counting treasure, and spending treasure. So injury and death. So everybody that was knocked out. So the soldiers roll on this table, and that lets you know if they're dead, badly wounded, or fully recovered. And then you get fully recovered means they go back to full health. Badly wounded means they're going to have to, they can remain in the warband, but they cannot participate in the next game. They must recover from their wounds. And dead, they should be removed from the sheet, and anything they're carrying is lost. For your wizard and apprentice, they have a little bit more survivability. 1 to 2, they're dead. 3 to 4, permanent injury. 5 to 6, badly wounded. 7 to 8, close call. And 9 and up on a d20 is fully recovered. So dead means they don't survive, and you need to recruit. You need to spend treasure and recruit when your wizard or apprentice dies. So there's different rules for what to do. Permanent injury means you roll on the injury table, and it gives you some sort of impairment, movement or something. Badly wounded means they have a major injury and will take time to heal. They can either play the next game without the spellcaster or pay money for medical treatment. Close call means no major injuries, but they lose all items that they were carrying. And fully recovered means they're all good for the next game. And here's your permanent injury table. So lost toes, smashed legs, crushed arms, lost fingers, never quite as strong, psychological scars, niggling injury, smashed jaw, lost eye. And then here's the effects of all of those to your fight or your movement or all that good stuff. And they stay. They stay for the life of your poor mangled soldier. Out of game spells. So this is where you summon constructs and demons and brew potions and all that good stuff. Experience and leveling. So there's a table. So some scenarios tell you that doing specific things will give you a certain amount of XP, and then just generally, like for participating, you get for every spell you attempt to cast but fail, you get 5 points of XP. Successful casts are 10 by either apprentice or wizard. 40 for a game which your wizard participates. 40 for each treasure your wizard or warband gets, and 5 for each uncontrolled creature killed. Yeah, so they stopped up to a maximum of 50. So even if you're massacring every creature on the board, you still can't go over 50. Oh, and you gain, interesting. No experience is gained for casting a spell with a casting number of 6 or less. So if you have, through XP, lowered the casting number of your spell, if it is 6 or less, you don't get any XP because that's an almost guaranteed. It's very easy to roll. And so every time you spend, you get a level. So you on your sheet, you start out as a level 0 and then go up. And the way you determine how you level is if you improve a stat, improve a known spell, or learn a spell, that will add 1 to your level. So that means the apprentice does as well. So you can improve a stat. So one of the following stats to a maximum shown in the bracket. So fight 5, shoot 5, wheel 8, health 20. And only 1 stat after each game. Improving a known spell, so you can use an XP to lower the casting number by 1. All spells may be reduced to casting number 5, but of course, like we saw, no, you won't earn any XP. And also, if remember too, if it's a spell where you need the casting number to use to resist, their willpower roll will resist it. The lower you get that number, it may be very, very easy to cast, but also very easy to resist. So it may not be all that useful. So learning a new spell comes from a grimoire. You can't sell grimoires. If you encounter them, they're often rolled on the treasure tables. Or you can buy them in some cases, but they're very expensive. But you must learn them even if you're out of school. You must spend the money. So you use a level and I believe some gold to learn a spell. Counting treasure. So if you get a regular treasure token off of the table, you roll on this d20, and it varies from 50 gold crowns to d20 times, to things like magic weapons and armor items, and then, 14 and above is a grimoire, so a chance to have new spells. And then potions as well, so you can brew potions. And they're, of course, lesser and greater potions, so more or less powerful. And there's a price to purchase it and a price to sell it. So if you're brewing it, or if you acquire it and you're not going to use it, you can sell it. Oh, and to brew them, of course, you need the ingredients cost. There you go, for greater potions. Oh, wow, look at that. Nice art. All right, and here's all the descriptions of all the different potions. So there's a lot of different abilities that potions can give you. And then scrolls and grimoires. So you do need... So this spell you don't know is in a grimoire, and you need to... if you already know it, you can sell it for 200, but you will never willingly part with it if it's a spell you don't know. You can store it in your wizard vault until you're ready to spend it, and then spend your... Oh, I guess there isn't... Oh, and that's right. So you store the grimoire, and then you roll on the... or you acquire it, and then you roll to see what spell it contains. All right. Okay, yeah, you may sell it. I guess you don't have to spend... I thought you had to spend... money to learn it. You just use it. All right, wow, this is going on. This will give you something to listen to on Black Friday. You're recovering from the mobs. So how magical armor and weapons work, and of course, remember, it has to be the same weapon type, and you have to be able to equip it, and you have to have the right number of slots, item slots, to be able to use it. If there's some special reason that it would take more than one, and of course, yeah. So what it does, and then the sale price and the purchase prices. Oh, there's a nice construct. All right, some magic items. Yeah, so there's a lot of rings and gloves and things, and then they give you all of the descriptions of what those do. All right, suspending treasure. So you can hire new soldiers, you can hire a new apprentice, but it's a bit more expensive because it's based on your wizard level. So if you lose an apprentice, you can buy another one, but you have to factor in what level your wizard's at, and then they come in at that level, but of course it costs a lot more. New wizards. So you can promote your apprentice to wizard status, and then you just keep all their current stats and take away the wizarding stuff. So the new wizard level will be that of the old wizard -6. Oh, so you guess you do take a downgrade. And of course, buying and selling. Oh, here's the optional black market rule. I don't think we looked at this last time. So many players find that allowing magic items to be purchased at any time takes away some of the fun. So if this is the case, your group may consider using the optional rule to limit and randomize the treasure that is available. I see. So you can generate what is available instead of just looking, if you have a lot of money, just looking at the table and say, I want to buy this, ring of whatever. You only have certain things available. Look at that. Excellent. That's what I want my Spellcaster to look like. It looks like an enemy though. Oh, and then the base. So establishing a base. So it's completely free. So after you've participated in one or more games, you can establish a base. So that would be things like inns, temples, crypts, towers, treasury, brewery, library, and laboratory. So these are where your base is located, like what part of the city, what part of the town, or in what building you're in. And each of them give you a certain benefit. So the inn, you may keep your extra soldiers there. So if you have above 8, keep the extras there. The temple gives you curing abilities. The crypt gives you bonuses to necromancy. The tower gives you casting bonuses for reveal secrets and awareness. Treasury lets you roll for possibly more treasure. The brewery gives you +1 will. Library, you can roll for grimoires. Laboratory, you get extra. You will gain experience after you learn. Yeah, you get extra XP. And then in addition to where it is located, you can add these resources. So a kennel, a cauldron, workshop, crystal ball, scriptorium, summoning circle, carrier pigeons, candles, and all of these things give you +1 to certain casting rolls and things, but these all cost gold crowns to add. And yeah, by paying the cost indicated, each one may only be added once, so you can't stack any of those. And so here we are onto the spells. So I think you should, if the game is exciting, I think I won't go through and kind of spoil all the spells and their effects. But the spell list on the wizard sheet will give you an idea of what is in each of the schools of magic. And so each of them have the name, the school, and the base casting number. And they do have cards. I think you can buy the cards as well. But in the back of the book, these are the wizard cards. So they give you a nice detailed explanation of the effects of the spells. And then, like I said, also the school, the casting number, and then the requirement, whether it's line of sight, touch, or what its range is. All right. Yeah, so a big portion of the book is going to be all of the spells. Oh, so what we're going to miss. Okay, I'll at least flip through because look at this art. So I'll just flip through so we can see some of the art. Oh, yeah, so here's area of effect, line of sight, out of game, self only, or touch would be the different uses of the spells. And they're all alphabetical in here, so easy to check. And then plus you have the cards, so you can print those out. And that's a nice thing I keep with my Warband, to remember what spells I've chosen and to just kind of lay them out in front of me. Look at that. Excellent. Yeah, I can't believe all this full page art. It's really gorgeous and just helps get you in the whole spirit of the schools of magic and kind of what you're doing and how to color and think about how you want your minis to look. All right, so that was all the spells, and here is the scenarios. So look at this. You can just roll a d20 if you want to do it randomly or kind of play through. If it's like the previous book, it's a pretty nice kind of building in complexity kind of thing. So you can play a generic non-scenario game or roll, and each of the scenarios will give you these things. So you'll have a setup explaining how things should look, any special rules, and then any special treasure or XP. And so each of the scenarios kind of do that. And so in something like a campaign like the Thaw of the Lich Lord, it's a little bit more involved. And because it's very narrative, they give you not only the special rules, but like what you're actually doing. And things do increase in complexity and build on each other. Like if you got this item in the previous scenario, then it'll have this effect. And so we have 20 of these. Look at this. Yeah, we have 20 of these. That's great. So that's a big amount. So it's going to take a while for you to play through all of those. So you may not even have to look for older campaigns. And then the bestiary. So you can do random monster encounters. An optional rule is every time a treasure is picked up, roll a random monster. And that makes it, uncontrolled monsters a little bit more out of control. And so here's all of our, and some of the monsters are pretty vicious. Snow leopards and like the ice toad with its ×2 damage and everything. Only trouble is you've got to find minis for everything. So when you're rolling on the random table, that's a little tricky. But, and then the special, character traits. So how this affects, how they work in the game. And then, oh, here we go. And then what you would need, what the different supplements will add. So there are different types of soldiers and monsters that are added in various supplements, and it tells you what is added. Oh, good. And then it goes through, any notable changes in all of the first edition supplements. And there's our cards. So here's all your spell descriptions and spell cards and the wizard sheet. Wow, we did it. Yeah, so there's your wizard sheet at the end. So that is Frostgrave. And the second edition, I think we covered most of the big differences between the two versions. And so as promised, let's take a quick look at my first edition. Here they are, immortalized in a Lego case here. So here is the first edition Warband. So this was a Necromancer. I'm going to cheat and pull my wizard sheet out here. So this is a Necromancer Warband with a woman-at-arms, a very badly wounded Templar, a thief, a couple of thugs, or actually four thugs and a thief. And so they're not all here. These are just the greatest hits. But as you can tell, so there's my very worried apprentice, my getting more and more demonic and kind of snake worshipping Necromancer. Here's the head of a zombie that he summons occasionally, and the head of a skeleton that gets occasionally summoned. There's the Warhound with my woman-at-arms, one of my thugs running at you. So a lot of thugs coming at you, and then one of the treasure chests that we use, and then an imp. So I was summoning imps and doing all kinds of insane things, but that is what what caused so much trouble in the first edition campaign. So very fun and very enjoyable game. And these worked really well. As you can see, the bases are kind of big, but it didn't cause any trouble with the rules. So as always, thank you so much for joining me. I will cut back to the Frostgrave graphics so I can trim this off. But thanks for joining me, and please like this video and share it around if you know some people that'd be interested in a look through Frostgrave, and if they would be interested. So upturntable.com for everything that we do, and please consider supporting us on patreon.com/upturntable. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.